You've probably seen those TikToks and reels that say things like, use this phrase and he'll step up, or do this and he'll want to provide for you. At first glance, they sound empowering, like a cheat code for relationships and getting what you want. But the truth is, most of those are teaching women how to manipulate men. It might get you short-term results, but it never builds a healthy relationship. In this video, I want to talk about the real difference between manipulation and authentic feminine energy, and how to use your femininity in a way that actually brings out those masculine qualities you desire, like protection, provision, and leadership, but in a healthy way and not a toxic way. Because when you lean into your femininity with honesty and presence, without gains and without control, you don't just get reactions, you inspire men to rise into their best selves, which is good for everyone in the relationship. I want to start out by calling out the trend. Like I said, I see a lot of clips where it's women giving others advice saying, say this and he'll pay, or act helpless and he'll act like a man. And at first it may seem playful and maybe even harmless, but it's a very slippery slope. Because what seems like lighthearted flirting quickly turns into a pattern of manipulation. And the problem is, manipulation might get you flowers once, or a dinner date, or some attention, but it really erodes trust over time. And it also attracts men who also like playing games, not the kind of men who are ready to show up with consistency and strength and genuine care. We hear about toxic masculinity a lot, but toxic femininity is where it gets twisted into control, like guilt, games, and victimhood to get what you want. And while it might feel powerful in the moment, it might actually weaken the relationship. I think part of this has risen because culturally we have been in a season of overcorrection. Because in earlier generations, women were told to, silence their needs and silence their voices. So when the pendulum did swing the other way, I feel like many women, maybe understandably, reached for control as a form of empowerment. But instead of leading to healthier dynamics, a lot of those energies turn into manipulation, just disguised as femininity and empowerment. Femininity at its core isn't about control at all. It's about presence and authenticity and trust. And that type of energy doesn't just give you short-term results. It actually brings out the best in men. And that should be the goal, right? Their protective, providing, and loving side should come out without power struggles. So it's very important to define the difference between toxic femininity, like manipulation energy, and authentic feminine energy. Manipulation is dropping hints instead of speaking honestly. So for example, saying something like, wow, it must be really nice when other girls get flowers, or acting helpless just to get attention. For example, pretending you can't handle something simple just so that he'll step in. Or using guilt, nagging, or even a silent treatment to force a reaction. Or playing games to test him. For example, ignoring his text messages to see if he'll chase harder. At its core, all of these are fear-based strategies. They come from the belief that if I don't control him, he won't show up for me. Psychology shows that this actually creates defensiveness. So when someone feels tricked or coerced, they are less likely to respond with love and more likely to withdraw. Actually saying what you feel and want, authenticity, it acts as a buffer. It will soften the stress and keep your bond strong. And now before some women in the comments start telling me in the comments, well, men manipulate too. No, duh. Men are just as capable to do manipulative behavior, whether that's, trying to change their girlfriend or leading them on, but I'm a woman, clearly, and I can only speak to what I understand more deeply, which is how women show up in relationships. If you want your man to grow into their healthiest masculine qualities, we have to take responsibility how we show up in our feminine energy as well. Now let's take a look at healthy feminine energy compared to the examples I gave prior. Sharing your needs and desires without pressure. So for example, saying, I love when you bring me flowers, it makes me feel so cherished. Allowing yourself to receive without gratitude, without guilt, and accepting his help or a gift with a smile and a genuine thank you. Expressing appreciation instead of expectation. For example, if you plan a date, say, thank you for planning that. It made me feel really cared for. And setting boundaries without game. Saying things like, consistency is really important for me. And if you're not in a place to offer that, I understand. Psychologically, these types of behaviors and phrasing things this way invite rather than control. They light up a man's reward system. So men get more dopamine when they are treated with trust and appreciation, and that in turn enforces that drive to keep showing up and keep doing the things that you want him to do. Here's a good self-check. If you notice yourself doing things like testing him, making him guess what you want, those are signs that you might be leaning too far into manipulation rather than authenticity in your relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that you're a bad person inherently. It just means that you've probably absorbed what our culture has normalized. Manipulation, yes, might get you results in the moment, like I've said before, but it will weaken your bond. And authenticity, yes, does feel riskier at first because it requires a lot of vulnerability on your end, but it's the only way to create genuine polarity and a healthy bond in your relationship. When I talk about healthy polarity, I'm talking about the natural way that masculine and feminine energies complement each other. And there's actual psychology and biology behind this. On the biological level, women's nervous systems respond to safety. And I've made previous videos about how our nervous system, particularly, when you've gone through a lot of trauma, your nervous system will crave toxic love. So if that's something you struggle with, I recommend going back and finding that video of mine I made a while ago. But anyways, when a woman feels safe and cared for, her body releases oxytocin, that bonding hormone that reminds you to relax and be open and relax emotionally. Men, on the other hand, are wired to thrive when they feel respected and trusted. That trust fuels dopamine and testosterone, which motivates men to step up, provide, and protect, which is the exact qualities that we want to bring out. It's the whole point of this video. When a woman shows up authentically in her femininity, receptive, appreciative, and honest, he'll rise up in his masculinity. And when he rises, it'll reinforce your sense of safety, which will deepen your femininity even more, and it makes leaning into the softer side much easier. It's a really positive feedback loop. But when constant testing and mistrust enter the picture, that loop breaks. Instead of oxytocin and dopamine, you get cortisol, which is the stress hormone. You don't want that. Instead of leadership, you get defensiveness and power struggles in a relationship. That's why authenticity matters so much. It literally shifts the chemistry of your relationship. Now, here's where I'll get a little personal for a moment, because I'm personally Christian, and one of the things that have made polarity easier for me is looking at it through a biblical framework. I know the verse about women submitting to their husbands makes a lot of feminists feel like they're ruffled, their feathers are being ruffled, and I get why from the first glance, because it sounds a little harsh if you stop there, but if you actually read the whole passage, it calls men to love their wives as Christ loved the church, which means with sacrifice, protection, and deep, deep care. Submission in that context doesn't mean being a doormat. It means choosing to trust a man's leadership, as long as that leadership is rooted in love. And in that type of dynamic, submission is not a dirty word. It's actually freeing. It means that you don't have to carry everything on your own anymore. Now, of course, you don't have to be Christian to experience healthy polarity. But for me, I just wanted to share that because faith adds a good framework for me where masculinity isn't about control, it's actually about service. And beyond faith, psychology tells us the same thing. When men feel respected and trusted, they rise. And when women feel safe, they open. It's not about being above the other or winning this game. It's about interdependence. Two different energies that balance and strengthen each other when they're both showing up authentically. And maybe you're wondering right now, okay, but how do I know if I'm in that healthy loop or if the polarity in my relationship is broken? Well, there's some pretty clear signs. You notice that you'll naturally soften in his presence and he naturally takes initiative without you having to push. And conflict doesn't turn into defensiveness, it actually turns into genuine care. But when polarity is broken, it feels really different. So for instance, you catch yourself nagging, hinting, and testing to get a response. He often withdraws and deflects and gets defensive when you bring something up that's bugging you. And you tend to feel guarded, like you can't fully relax when you're around him. And he only really seems to step up when you pressure him versus him stepping up because of his own drive. Also, when that polarity is broken, communication tends to feel like a tug of war instead of teamwork. And I recommend you guys should actually talk to your partner, open up that dialogue and ask them, which flip of the coin do you feel like you're experiencing in the relationship? Go over those points I just made and have that conversation, because once you know those signs, you can't unsee them. So that's why I feel like it was really important for me to give clear examples, because healthy polarity feels like breathing. It reinforces itself. Rather, when it's an unhealthy polarity, it literally feels like you're having to drag a person uphill. So let's talk about the how. How do you actually move from habits of control and nagging to a place of authenticity and trust? The first step is your mindset. You have to shift from fear to trust. Stop being scared of feeling like you're gonna lose a game. Instead of thinking, if I don't control him, he won't show up, start telling yourself, if I'm honest and receptive, the right man will rise. And if he doesn't, that's your answer. That mindset will free you from chasing and forcing, because the wrong men will filter themselves out, okay? The second is communication. A lot of manipulation happens because a lot of women are scared to say what they really want. But clarity is powerful and attractive. If you want something, say it. If you want a boundary, say it, and voice it. But voice it calmly. Third is appreciation. This one might sound kind of small, but it's huge. Men are wired to repeat what gets noticed. I'm gonna repeat that. Men are wired to repeat and do more of what gets noticed. So when you genuinely acknowledge effort, even in little ways, it'll fuel his drive to keep showing up. Not because you tricked him into it, but because it will feel good for him to be seen and valued. So for example, if he took some initiative to wash the dishes for you, or, took initiative to plan out a date, or got you some flowers randomly one day, thank him and be so appreciative of it, no matter how small, because if that small thing or something that he does is something you particularly want more of, it's important that you express that appreciation for it, because it'll encourage him to keep doing it more. Which kind of leads into the fourth tip, which is work on learning to receive, which I know is really tough for a lot of women, especially the women who have been really hyper independent or taught that relying on someone else makes you weak. I used to be like that. But feminine energy thrives in receptivity. If he opens a door or offers help, or like I said, plans something for you, accept it gracefully. Receiving is not weakness, and it doesn't mean that you can't get things yourself, but it will encourage him to step further into his masculinity. And something practical that a lot of people don't think about is that what you consume every day affects how you So if your social media feed is filled with toxic femininity, or watching really toxic dating shows that are all about winning and teaching you how to play games and just get what you want no matter at what cost, it's going to seep into your mindset whether you realize it or not. So unfollow accounts that make you feel anxious or competitive or fake or offer really manipulation tips. Start following women who model grace, softness. The more you absorb healthy content, the easier it is to, embody it yourself, and it'll keep you motivated to keep becoming that version of yourself you want to be. And lastly, discernment. Not every man is ready to rise into a healthy leadership role. So no amount of softness or taking in these tips or authenticity is going to change that. And that's okay. That's not your problem. And start being real. The wrong men will just naturally fall away on their own, and the right kind of man will lean in stronger. And when you live in that space, you don't just get a man that, only does things for you. You create a relationship where you both thrive. Before I close this out, I really want to see the two genders bridge that gap that has been widening over the years. We've been told to see each other as enemies, women versus men, men versus women. But the truth is that we are meant to complement each other. When we stop playing games and start showing up authentically, we create space for real partnership and not competition. And listen, this isn't about perfection, it's about awareness. If you catch yourself falling into old habits like testing, hinting, and trying to pull strings again, don't beat yourself up. Just notice it, pause, take a deep breath, and try the authentic version instead. That's something I've had to work on. The thing I struggled the most with, I think, was using little nagging. For instance, if I just cooked dinner and then I started cleaning the dishes too, and I would wish that he would come in and help on his own without having to ask, I would let out a or start putting things down louder. And that's one of those moments where I had to pause and remind myself, it's okay to ask for help. And if your partner is good, like I'm blessed to have, he will happily step up and do it for you and help. And at a certain point, you don't have to ask. So now whenever I do cook dinner or make us a meal, I never have to ask him to do the dishes. He naturally steps up and does it on his own. Because that time he did come over and help me when I asked, I showed a lot of appreciation for it. And now that reinforced him to want to do it on his own without being asked going forward. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe and share this with someone who might find it useful. All your guys' support really means a lot to me as I'm trying to grow this new channel. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, bye!